I've got one question from Emma and another question from Dr. Torta, because both spoke about the importance of having a successful election in Afghanistan and a transparent election. Emma said that, that international focus is waning for Afghanistan, shifting away from Afghanistan. The international community, although they have on numerous conferences, they have, written that future support for Afghanistan will hinge on a successful election, transparent election. At the time when the international community is de-escalating their presence in Afghanistan, so how much leverage they got to pressure Karzai to make sure that will hold a transparent election, and whether Karzai takes them seriously at the time that the international community, in fact, has almost very limited leverage. That's one thing. The question from Dr. Torta is that you said that election for a country like Afghanistan, everywhere, particularly for Afghanistan, is very important, transparent election. In a country that the population is fractured along ethnic line, no matter how transparent election you will have, someone will win, but that person will take all power because the political system is such that almost all power rests with one person. So let's say Dr. Ahmadzai wins this time. But no matter how transparent is the election, but will the rest of the population not feel that they are the loser? So what do you think? What the international community should do for this? Thank you.
We'll just have one question from the back, and then we'll have some more questions, and then we'll answer these first three. Thank you, Mr. Ali.
Yes, my name is Sharif Ali. I'm from BBC. The first question is from Dr. Masuma Turfa, as she was working extensively and closely with the UNAMA in Afghanistan. What is your conception of the impact of the elections? Will it be a transparent elections, or at least satisfy the hopes of Afghans inside and outside? Another question is from Emma. What do you think about the presence of international media in Afghanistan after the withdrawal of international forces? Because there are concerns in Afghanistan and outside Afghanistan among the Afghans that with the withdrawal of international forces, there will be lack of attention towards what will go on in Afghanistan like before. Another question from Mr. Fayyaz. He said that there are institutions built in Afghanistan. How fragile is these institutions when the Taliban are actually extending their powers into different districts, especially in southeastern Afghanistan? And the last question from one of the friends who came from Netherlands. I'm asking him what they have done to protest their wives as Afghan refugees outside against what they call illegal proceedings in the country by the government of Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll answer those questions now before we have any more than we remember them. Thank you. I don't know if you want to start us.
Thank you for your question. I agree that the population is fractured. The problems are far, far more serious than that, as you well know, in Afghanistan. It's not just the population that's fractured. Population is also badly traumatized. And it's had years and years of deceit, years and years of interference from internationals without any success, years and years of problems. But democracy or democratization is a very, very long and arduous task. It takes a long time. It takes a long time of healing and going forward. And the main thing is not to lose heart, because if you look at the base of Afghan society, you see that through these processes they have learned a lot, and they are becoming more and more united. I mean, as I was there in the past few years, like all the political parties, 20, 25 political parties came together and, sorry?
Yeah, it's a reduced.
120.
No, about 20, 25, 27 parties came together and created a coalition, and they gave out their statements all together, and they took a united position. So this is important. It is moving. Civil society is no comparison to what it was in 2002, because I worked in Afghanistan also in 2002 to 2004. Huge move has happened in the underlying movement of the people and the way they think. If you speak to most Afghans in Afghanistan now, they say, no going back. There is no going back to Taliban. You know, I was a little frightened. They would all tell you, there is no going back. They're not going to allow them to take this away from us. They have worked hard on it, and they don't want to go back. So I think you just have to be patient. It will take a long time, a very long time. But it will happen. Will the elections be transparent? Maybe 60%. I think international community is watching, and is watching very carefully this time. And it's watching in connection with giving funds to Afghanistan. So whoever wants to receive international donations, international funds, knows that it has to be credibly transparent as far as its actions is concerned. So whatever you do, you need to stick to some yardsticks that the international community has set. I don't think they can get away with it. As a point of news, this morning, I mean, there was a lot mentioned about the security agreement. But this morning, President Karzai said he's not going to sign it. And the Americans said we are going to pull out all our military. This was in this morning's news. So anytime this kind of thing could happen, maybe with the forces, but United Nations is there. United Nations is not going to leave, and Security Council is going to ensure. And international countries, they are there. I mean, you don't have to always have this dialogue about forces mixed up with the rest of the international community. That's military. This is political. The political side and the economic side is working hard, I assure you. And it will be able to put pressure. But if the other forces are much more powerful and they defeat the political, then yes. But it will be 60% transparent.
Yeah. So I think just very quickly to answer your question about the presence of international media, I mean, I think we've already seen a sort of media drawdown, that's matched the drawdown of the troops. As I mentioned, I'm the only full-time correspondent for a British paper, a lot of now in Kabul. Other people have stringers, or they cover from Islamabad mostly. We've seen a lot of the American TV networks that used to keep a correspondent there don't anymore. They're planning to send people back to the election, but not, they don't cover Afghanistan full time. And certainly part of the motivation for the large media coverage was that foreign troops in the home countries of these media outlets were dying in Afghanistan. But I think there was also an investment in a sort of emotional, political investment in the idea of rebuilding Afghanistan reconstruction, that I think to a degree has been lost. As that poll I cited earlier from America, where showing that the war in Afghanistan is now more unpopular on the American public than the Iraq War or the Vietnam War. If you think about how people thought about the war in Afghanistan 5 years ago, that's a pretty devastating statistic, actually. So, I think probably, there will continue to be a reduction in media coverage. I think the extent of that reduction probably will depend on what happens in the coming years. As I mentioned earlier, the way the election is held, I think, will influence how Western audiences perceive Afghanistan, how interested they are in Afghanistan. I think, if the election is successful, perhaps you would see more, continued sort of political attention given to what happens in Afghanistan. But I think it's very hard to say right now. And then just very quickly on, does the West have leverage? Well, certainly the West thinks it should have leverage. If you look at the state of the Afghan economy and Afghan finances, the government can't pay for itself or for its security forces. Those are, tax revenues are very low. The government's been trying to increase them, but with moderate success given. If you look at most Afghans are still farmers, and most of them are still subsistence farmers. It's not a very profitable tax base, despite the development that you've seen in the cities, which has been very impressive. There's billions of dollars a year going to fund the Afghan government, the NSF. If you look at diplomats or politicians, they certainly think they should have leverage. If you look at what actually happens in Afghanistan, I think generally the leverage seems to be, somewhat limited, which they then get very frustrated about. Karzai's been pretty open about the fact that he feels, first of all, that the international community owes Afghanistan money and support for the sacrifices that Afghans have made in the war on terror. And he's also been pretty straightforward about the fact that he thinks that the international community has invested too much in Afghanistan to just walk away. I mean, notably before his last trip to America, his chief of staff, Mr. Khorram, told the Washington Post, you need us more than we need you. I think that sort of says it all really about the extent of foreign leverage in Afghanistan. It is. Karzai definitely takes the West seriously. Look at his response to the revelations in Gates, but leverage is limited, I think.
Thank you very much for the question, and due to respect for all different views about Afghanistan, and my first direct response to your question is yes, institutions are sustainable and they will survive. Now, I tell you the reason why I think in that way. As an academician and analyst of the education system in the Muslim world as well as in Afghanistan, but also on different issues related to Afghanistan, let us look at Afghanistan. Afghanistan is not all about the Taliban. And anybody could think that Afghanistan is all about the Taliban, this is wrong. Even if you look within the Pashtun communities from where the Taliban takes most of its support, all Pashtuns do not support the Taliban, let alone the entire country. On that, whatever happens, whatever way the Taliban is increasing their attacks, yes, they are predictable, I used that in my presentation, but Afghanistan is not all about the Taliban. And also, we have to remember, the conflict in Afghanistan does not start with the Taliban. And the Taliban is not the only party that is involved in the politics of Afghanistan. There is the wider international as well as regional powers. If you look in the way that Pakistan that has been staunch supporters of the Taliban itself, the way that Pakistan has been changing is quite incredible. Pakistan is no longer the Pakistan of the 1980s in Afghanistan. Pakistan has an increasing interest in economic development in Afghanistan. If you look into Central Asia, Pakistan actually has deprived itself from the Central Asian market. If you go to Central Asia, you see all Chinese and Turkish products, which supposedly to be filled with Pakistani products. If Afghanistan was peaceful and Pakistani products could go through the Afghanistan to Central Asia. Saudi Arabistan, Saudi's position in the Muslim world, as well as in the wider world, has been changing. So the Saudi Arabia doesn't have that credibility that it used to have in the 1980s, and it is changing. The role of Russia has increasingly been more active in the world politics. So when we talk about Afghanistan, we have to think that Afghanistan is not all about the Taliban. And there are other people in Afghanistan, and there are other groups in Afghanistan as well. The way that India and Pakistan is developing more peaceful relationship, the way Iran and the United States will develop more peaceful relationship, the role of not only of the Taliban, but all other extremist groups inside Pakistan and in Afghanistan will gradually diminish. Now I tell you why it is sustainable. Yes, there is a group of Taliban that are favoring the war in Afghanistan. But you can see that there is a lot of hypocrisy within the Taliban as well. What I see is the Taliban ideology and organization is not sustainable. That's what matters more for the future of Afghanistan. You see the Mullah Omar in his Eid message, he says that fight hard against the foreigners. That was his message in the Eid. But you can again see that the same Quetta Shura Council of the Taliban is holding its offices in Qatar. They're holding negotiations and talks with the Americans. What is important to here to understand is that the Taliban leadership neither are willing nor are able to live in hiding. It's not possible. They know that they cannot hide themselves. They know that whatever little asset that they have, it will diminish in front of their eyes. And they want to cash in that. And this is exactly in Pakistan, the politicians have noticed that the Taliban has been their asset. They have been using the resistance forces in the 1980s as their asset. And they know how this asset is going to diminish as soon as the American bases will stay in Afghanistan. So what I see is, yes, there are increasing attacks of the Taliban. Taliban may attack one province, another province. They may burn one school, another school. They cannot burn the education system. They cannot go and hold, let us say, Kashmir as say you are going to build here our government. They may attack, yes, but they're not able to sustain any places in the country. So what I see is that the Taliban ideology and the Taliban organization itself is not sustainable. We have to see Afghanistan deeper than what is we see in the media, or deeper what happens on the surface. And if you look, the Taliban have been contributing to the political process. Their members are in the parliament. Their members are in favor of political settlement. The Taliban are building schools. This is amazing. They are building universities in Kabul. They are contributing to the education system. Doesn't matter what is their policy that is about sustainability of the institutions. When they are contributing to building schools, it means they are contributing to the sustainability of the education system. Taliban is they're having their own peace agenda. Doesn't matter how much they push. Of course, everybody pushes their own agenda, but what matters is they are contributing to the peace process. And Taliban also have their own media that have interest in media. And this was taboo for them in 1996 to 2001. So Taliban also have learned from their own experiences from 1996 to 2001 that the way they handle the situation in Afghanistan, that the way they try to rule in Afghanistan has not produced anything positive for them. So if any asset that is left for the Taliban, it's the only way to come forward and make a negotiation and be part of any future government. Otherwise, they have to live in hiding, which is not sustainable for them.
فکر میکنید در افغانستان الان یک بحران جدی اعتماد ملی وجود دارد. دومی که شما ببینید در افغانستان ملیت‌های مختلف زندگی میکنه، 11 نفر نامزد ریاست جمهوری، 11 نفر پشتون است. بعد جواب سوال دیگه شما اساسی شما کنید که کسایی که ما اومدیم اینجا صحبت کردیم به نمایندگی همه ما صحبت نکردیم. ما یک به حساب نمایندگی خود و یک گروه معینی که ما هستیم صحبت میکنیم و همه تمامی حرفایی را که زدم بر اساس ارقامی بود که خدمت شما اعلام کردم و اسنادی بود که ارائه شده و عملکرد کرزی در طی 12 سال گذشته نشان دهنده این است که تمرکز قدرت است که فساد بار آورده و این وظیفه ما این بوده که ما مثل امروز کنفرانس‌های را تدبیر بکنیم، حقایق را بر مردم افغانستان و شهروندان افغانستان بگوییم و در مقالاتی باید نوشته شود، پژوهش‌های صورت بگیره و این مقالات پژوهش‌ها راجع شود به دولت افغانستان و مردم افغانستان و کارگران افغانستان که اونا سرش تصمیم گیرن. متاسفانه تصمیم گیرنده نیستن اونا.
The answer to the question was that by making these conferences and us coming to these conferences and taking part in the conferences is raising a voice for the people of Afghanistan, and we write articles about these problems that we have in the papers and in the magazines and everything, so to reach our voice to the government of Afghanistan. But unfortunately the government are not decisive on what to do for Afghanistan.
Would you like to ask your question now?
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Ahmad, and I'm one of the medical students in the University of Sussex in Brighton. And today I came here, and my question would be from Emma. As a journalist, I've heard a lot that journalists are very good observers of the politicians. And being a journalist in Afghanistan, a full-time journalist, you must have observed the big leaders of Afghanistan. such as the president and the other ministers in Afghanistan, who have very key role in playing in Afghanistan. My question to you is, why don't the president or the government of Afghanistan invest more in education, if not more than the security, just up to almost equal how much they spend to the security in education of Afghanistan, in order to build a complete different generation to what we have at the moment in Afghanistan, a complete different mentality to what we have in Afghanistan. Why don't they invest in there? And the question is, when you observe them, can you see them being frightened from the future generation of Afghanistan, which may cause a revolution in Afghanistan? Is that the reason that they don't invest more in education in Afghanistan? Or are they frightened that they will lose power and the new generation will gain power from them in Afghanistan, so they no longer have a key role to play in Afghanistan? Thank you very much.
My name is Ahmadi. I'm from Afghanistan Society Teaching University. My question is to any of the panelists. How much threat is Pashtun nationalism both in Pakistan and in Afghanistan? And also how much Pashtun supremacy is a threat to Afghanistan post-2014, which we consider to be an Afghanistan for all ethnic groups. As one of the slides showed that President Pashtun, Vice President Tajik Hazara was right. So why the West, and also my other question is that why the West always thinks that a Pashtun or a guy from one ethnic group has the right to rule or be the president of Afghanistan? When that should be changed, or is it the time that these perceptions should be changed or not? Thank you.
I'm also one of the students at Afghanistan Technical University. My question is directed to Dr. Yahya Abaiza, if I'm saying that correctly. My question is about youth and job opportunities during election, post-election, and in the years to come. Because as we know, to have a democratic, progressive, and successful society and country, the youth is the pillar and the cornerstone of that society. So what measures can the current government take and future governments take to create such jobs and opportunities?
Hi, I'd like to apologise for the nature of my questions because they are purely for my own interest. My first question is directed to Emma and Ms. Graham Harrison. I just want to say, I see the way the Western media is and the way news is portrayed. It's often without history. It's very, breaking news. This has happened, and it's never put in context. And I've recently gotten to follow Afghan news, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Although my diary is quite limited, but I'd like to ask you if there's something that the Western media has to learn from Afghan news. My second question is to Dr. Torfe, and I'd like to ask you, I think since the Laura Bush radio address, America has this tactic of making women's rights synonymous with democracy, and of course, you'll know this discourse has a lot of importance in the way, in backing the Western position in Afghanistan. But I'd just like to ask you how that is in Afghanistan, how Afghan women in Afghanistan view their own rights, and if they believe that it can only come through achievement of democracy, full transparency, whatever, one that's equal to Britain, I'd say. And what your thoughts are on it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this important conference. My name is Dariush Nasimi and I am an Afghanistani student living in London. I have a brief question for the panel today, which I will read in English and Farsi. Would the resurgence of Taliban in the south of Afghanistan result in the north-south partition of Afghanistan and at the same time interrupt the election process? And I'm Farsi. هموطنان گرامی درود بر شما. اسم من داریوش نسیمی است و یک دانش آموز افغانستانی مقیم لندن هستم. سوال من به پنل امروزی است که آیا برگشت طالبان به جنوب افغانستان یک گام به سوی تجزیه افغانستان می باشد خواهد بود و آیا همی برگشت طالبان توانایی مختل کردن انتخابات افغانستان روند انتخابات افغانستان را خواهد داشت؟ تشکر.
The first question, Pashtun nationalism, I think is more of a comment than a question, and I think it's rather nationalistic in its own nature. Because if you're pushing us to say to you, yes, Pashtun nationalism is bad and Pashtuns shouldn't be fighting, I'm not going to get into that conversation. Pashtun nationalism or Tajik nationalism or whatever nationalism might be part of the reality of Afghanistan, and you, the young people of Afghanistan, need to look at these very carefully, need to resolve them in order to resolve the problems that you've faced over the past 30 so years with this issue that has caused so much fraction, so much tension, so much trauma for the civil society in Afghanistan. So you educated academics, you need to get to grips with these and resolve these problems. I don't think I am in the right place to address that issue. The second question to me was women's rights. Is women's rights synonymous with democracy, and how do Afghan women view their own rights? Afghan women are, I mean, I'm talking only about the people that I have met and I would categorize as leaders of Afghan women's movements. I can't have a perfect understanding of the Afghan women as a whole. But I think the Afghan women's rights leaders are fully aware of what threats are against Afghan women, what rights they have, and how they should be treated. I have had ample discussions with a lot of women, whether MPs, women's rights movements, educationalists, ministers, people like this. They are fully aware. I think much more strategic communication is needed for the Afghan women as a whole to kind of make them, allow them to think or discuss and debate whether rights and wrongs are. And the media can play a huge role in taking this to women. For my own small part, while I was at UNAMA, I did several media series programs about Afghan women and elections, Afghan women and political issues. These kinds of things can help, but it will take a long, long time. But the leaders are aware of the rights.
So,
sorry, there was this north-south divide. I'm sorry about this, Emma. The north-south divide is one of the possibilities that many people are discussing these days. But I think any expert on Afghanistan or anyone who understands the politics of Afghanistan will be rather foolish to predict what will happen in Afghanistan. I don't think that's a possibility, but I mean, I wouldn't put it out of a set of scenarios that are possible. But I don't think people of Afghanistan want to be divided, despite all the talk about maybe different ethnic groups, different parts of the country. I think people of Afghanistan love their country and they want to be united in one place together. Political problems persist in every country, and there are ethnic groups in every country. So we need to find a solution out of it.
So just very quickly to follow up to that last thing, I've reported from other countries where there's been tensions between ethnic groups, and certainly members of those groups have been very keen to create separate countries as one way of resolving them. And one of the things that struck me when I first came to Afghanistan was that I found across different ethnic groups and different parts of the country, whatever tensions there might be, people said to me again and again, and I find they still say to me, we want our country to stay whole, we want Afghanistan to stay as it is. And of course, in any country, you know, the UK is about to face a referendum on part of it splitting off. I mean, you can have people looking for independence anywhere in the world, and you know, I'm not saying there aren't people in Afghanistan who would like the country to separate, but my experience in a very anecdotal form has been that most Afghans would like their country to stay together and somehow find a way to resolve their differences. On the question of Western media learning from Afghan media, any foreign correspondent is always indebted to the local media of the country she works in. Of course, they have many more people on the ground and a better understanding of that country. And you know, one of the first things you do is work out which newspapers, which TV stations you need to follow, and make sure that you're reading them and listening to them. However, you know, looking at it from another perspective, the BBC, for instance, probably covers the UK in much more depth and historical context than a US equivalent or an Afghan equivalent, because all the Afghan media are doing, or the majority of what the Afghan news media are doing, is covering Afghanistan. If I'm writing something about Afghanistan, I'm competing with the whole rest of the world to get it in the paper. So, you know, if there's 4 bombs in Cairo, if there's, you know, also, you know, less serious political news, you know, if Justin Bieber gets arrested, all those things, people are interested in them. You know, maybe they shouldn't be, that's a separate debate, but all those things are competing for space in the paper. So, you know, an average news article is maybe 600 to 800 words long in a paper if it's not a sort of lead item. So, you know, of course there's always so much more historical context, you could get into anything, but I mean, if you're trying to talk about what's happened in 600 to 800 words, you've got to sort of weigh up how much of what's going on now and how much of history you're going to put into that article. And I mean, another criticism we often get as journalists is that our coverage of Afghanistan is entirely negative. And myself and quite a lot of other journalists actually look quite hard for
perhaps a bit Orientalist as well.
Well, that's a whole separate issue, but I mean, just very quickly, you know, people say we have very negative coverage. We go to quite, I'm interested in telling more diverse stories about Afghanistan. Recently, I got the paper to give all of, I wrote an article about the Afghanistan-Pakistan football match that took up all of page 3, which is an important page in the paper. You know, people are interested in hearing things about Afghanistan that challenge their own ideas, and hearing more positive stories. I've written about artists, I've written about a building boom that's going on in Kabul just recently. But, you know, a lot of people who criticise us don't see those articles because they're not necessarily on the front page, because, you know, the front page news tends to be the big breaking news story, and a lot of those positive stories aren't, you know, wouldn't be classified as breaking news. So, and just very quickly on the question I didn't answer earlier on the swing in the press discourse, I maybe expressed myself badly. I didn't mean that there was a swing in media coverage, maybe more that it reflects a swing in the wider political discourse about Afghanistan, and how people in countries that are sending soldiers or money to Afghanistan felt about the war and their views on it and the whole mission in Afghanistan.
Thank you very much. The first question was about Pashtun nationalism. Let us a bit deconstruct the Pashtun nationalism. Pashtun nationalism is a political doctrine, it's a political ideology. It's not a cultural phenomenon. It's not rooted in the culture of the Pashtun people itself. So when we talk about Pashtun nationalism, we cannot say that all Pashtuns across the country are nationalists and they are against Tajiks and Hazaras and Uzbeks. That's wrong. It is a political ideology and is rooted in the historical and political context of Afghanistan, which I'm not going to talk about. It is a threat. Yes, it was to some extent, it was a threat. And the threat of the Pashtun nationalism as a political doctrine was more indirectly to the Pashtun community itself rather than to non-Pashtuns. I'll give you a small example. At the end of the 20th century, Mullah Omar is produced. So that's a big threat to the Pashtun community itself. But it's not a cultural threat. You cannot say that Pashtun nationalism relates to the Pashtun people. That's wrong. But it is fading away. Because as I said to you, the changing pattern of power in Afghanistan is fading away this phenomenon. Now the next question was about the job opportunities and youth. Yes, it's a very important question. But the matter is not just about the issue of the responsibility of the government. Yes, it is the responsibility of government. But if you look at the diaspora communities from Afghanistan, in Iran and Pakistan primarily, because there we have more than 5 million diaspora communities. If you look at the job skills that the people have learned in these 2 countries, In Pakistan, they learned more about English language, but they did not develop intellectual capacity the way that the diaspora developed in Iran. So there are two different situations. When they come back to Afghanistan, suddenly there is a reconstruction process, massive reconstruction process, but the needed skills is not always there. Another issue with job opportunities is security. Today, not many people are ready to go in tribal areas to work in terms of education, in terms of health, agriculture. So it is not that there is no job opportunities, there are, but security is a major challenge. And the other thing is also we need to have much stronger private sector to create more job opportunities in Afghanistan. The issue of partition of Afghanistan between North and South, this is just at the moment as a political debate. It doesn't have a reality, and you cannot divide a country during the time of war. The issue of Kashmir hasn't been resolved between India and Pakistan for the past 50 years. Euro land hasn't been resolved between Afghanistan and Pakistan. This type of partition is not going to be accepted, not going to be resolved immediately. So let us not entertain that idea at the moment.
Thank you very much. My question is from Dr. Yehya Faisal. You mentioned Pakistan's strategic interests. I would like you to elaborate and outline those interests and say how have they been protected and implemented prior to September 2001.
Are you looking upon how?
How have they been implemented and protected?
How?
Those strategic interests of Pakistan. How have they been implemented in Afghanistan before September 2001? And from 2001 till now, and how would you see them alter and be implemented after 2014 or after international troop withdrawal? Thank you.
I'm sorry, it's a very long debate, Pakistan's strategic interest in Afghanistan itself, because partly...
That's the main one. Really.
Yeah, partly Afghanistan itself is responsible for making Pakistan to develop its own strategic interests in terms of interference in other in Afghanistan, because the issue of raising Pashtunistan and other issues have been from our side as well. We cannot always blame Pakistan for a strategic interest, and in Pakistan it has. So fair enough, every country must have national strategic interests. If Afghanistan doesn't have this, the problem of Afghanistan primarily. But Pakistan's main strategic interest was to settle the issue of Durham line, accordingly in line with the interest of Pakistan. So that's how this is the main priority of Pakistan. The other strategic interest of Pakistan was to isolate Iran and to confront India's influence in Afghanistan, because the governments of Afghanistan have always been friendly with India and less friendly, at least in terms of political handling, with Pakistan. So for Pakistan, it was important that it should not be sandwiched between three different neighboring countries with different strategic interests. They were successful to some extent, but for most part, they also were not successful. So the most biggest success was, as I said, to the rolling back the Soviet empire from Afghanistan, because Pakistan was feeling threatened by that. But since then, they're really up and down. So the biggest success was bringing the Taliban. But again, when the United States involved in Afghanistan, they have to sacrifice this baby for the bigger power. Now they are trying to use the last asset as the Taliban, but they are very well aware that the next Pakistan strategic interest in Afghanistan is economy. They want to export their products to Afghanistan and to Central Asia, and they know that they are also caught up between Iran and India and two other strategic powers. So I think that Pakistan's next strategic interest is economy, and for that they need peace in Afghanistan.
Well, thank you very much to everybody who has spoken this morning, all panellists, speakers, and you who have participated so actively. Lunch is on its way. We'll be back here at 2:15. We have quite a busy afternoon.